The divine realm had always been a place of light and order, a sanctuary where the gods ruled with wisdom and power. But now, even in the heart of this celestial paradise, a shadow loomed. Marduk, the supreme god, stood alone in the highest tower of his palace, his gaze fixed on the far reaches of the cosmos, where the dark clouds of war gathered on the horizon. The war between Tiamat and the demon race had reached his ears, the echoes of their battle reverberating through the very fabric of the universe. Marduk knew Tiamat's ambitions all too well. She was a creature of relentless will, driven by a hunger for power that could not be sated. Her conquest of the underworld and the demon race was but the first step in a much larger plan, a plan that now threatened the very foundations of the divine realm. Tiamat would not stop until she achieved her ultimate goal, the destruction of the divine race and the subjugation of all who opposed her. Marduk could feel the weight of this knowledge pressing down on him, a heavy burden that he alone must bear. He had always been the guardian of the cosmos, the one who maintained the balance between light and darkness, order and chaos. But now, that balance was in jeopardy, and Marduk knew that the time for decisive action was fast approaching. The giants. Far from the celestial heights of Marduk's throne, Tiamat moved through the shadows of the underworld, her mind working with the precision of a master strategist. She knew that to overthrow the divine race, she would need more than just the power of her dark empire. She would need allies, and she had already set her sights on the four most powerful races in the cosmos: the dragons, the witches, the monsters, and the giants. Each of these races possessed a unique power, a strength that could turn the tide of battle in her favor. But they were also fiercely independent, creatures of ancient pride and tradition, who would not easily bend to her will. Tiamat knew that she would have to use every ounce of her cunning and strength to bring them to her side. She began with the giants, a race that had long harbored a deep hatred for the divine race, ever since Nergal and his warriors had crushed them in a brutal campaign. The leader of the giants, Uthrog, was a massive figure with muscles like iron and a voice that rumbled like an earthquake. His eyes burned with a deep-seated rage, a hatred that had festered. Tiamat found Uthrog in the heart of the mountains, where the giants made their home in vast, craggy fortresses carved from the living rock. She approached him with the confidence of one who knows her power, her serpentine form coiling around the great stone pillars that supported the giants' hall. Uthrog, Tiamat hissed, her voice smooth and filled with dark promise. You and your people have suffered under the heel of the divine race for far too long. Nergal led the charge against you, but it was Marduk who ordered your defeat, who forced you into the mountains to live like beasts. Join me, and together we will bring the divine race to its knees. You will have your vengeance, and your people will be restored to their rightful place. Uthrog's eyes narrowed, his great fists clenching at his sides. The giants do not forget their enemies, he rumbled, his voice filled with a deep, simmering anger. Nergal and his warriors will pay for what they did to us. We will join you, Tiamat, but know this, we fight for our own reasons, not yours. When the time comes, we will claim what is ours, and woe to any who stand in our way. Tiamat's smile was cold and calculating, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. Then we are agreed, she purred, her voice like the slither of a blade through silk. Together, we will bring the divine race to ruin. The rejection of the dragons. High above the world, where the air was thin and the sky was a deep, endless blue, the dragons made their home among the peaks of ancient mountains. These were beings of immense power, born of fire and storm, whose very breath could reduce cities to ash and whose wings could block out the sun. They were led by Dracora, an ancient Wyrm whose scales shone like molten gold and whose eyes burned with the light of 1,000 suns. Tiamat ascended to these heights, her serpentine form undulating through the thin air with a grace that belied the fury within her. She found Dracora perched on the highest peak, his massive form coiled around the mountain as if he were part of the very earth itself. The air crackled with the raw energy of his presence, and the sky above was dark with storm clouds, as if the heavens themselves were preparing for battle. Dracora, Tiamat began, her voice carrying on the wind like a whisper of doom. You and your kin are beings of unmatched power, rulers of the skies. But the divine race sees you as a threat, a force to be controlled or destroyed. Join me, and together we will bring the divine race to its knees. The skies will be yours, and your reign will be unchallenged. Dracula's eyes, glowing with an ancient intelligence, narrowed as he considered her words. His voice, when he spoke, was deep and resonant, like the rumble of distant thunder. You speak of power and conquest, Tiamat, he rumbled, his gaze fixed on her with a piercing intensity. But the dragons are not so easily swayed. We are a race apart, born of fire and storm, and we bow to no one. We will not be pawns in your war against the divine race. Tiamat's expression hardened, her eyes narrowing as she realized that Dracula would not yield easily. You misunderstand me, Dracula, she hissed, her voice cold and menacing. This is not a request. The divine race will come for you, whether you join me or not. They will clip your wings, extinguish your fire, and leave your bones to rot in the dust. But with me, you will stand at the apex of power. Defy me, and you will be destroyed. Dracula's gaze remained unwavering, his resolve as unyielding as the mountains themselves. We have faced the wrath of the gods before, and we have survived, he growled, his voice filled with a deep, primal power. We will not be coerced, Tiamat. The dragons will not fight your war. Tiamat's fury ignited, her eyes blazing with a dark fire. You dare defy me, she roared, her voice shaking the very mountain on which Dracula perched. Then you will know the true meaning of wrath, Dracula. I will break you, and your kin will kneel before me, whether they wish it or not. The rebellion of the monsters. Far below, in the wild, untamed places of the world, the monsters dwelled. These were creatures of nightmare, born from the darkest corners of the cosmos, beings of chaos and fury who thrived in the shadows where even the bravest feared to tread. They were led by Gorgon, a massive, hulking figure whose skin was like stone and whose eyes could turn men to ash with a single glance. Tiamat descended into the heart of the monster realm, where the trees twisted and writhed like living things, and the ground was soft and yielding, as if it were made of flesh rather than earth. The very air was thick with the scent of decay, and the shadows seemed to move of their own accord, whispering secrets in a language older than time. Gorgon, Tiamat called out, her voice echoing through the twisted forest like a dark wind. You and your kin are creatures of chaos, beings born of the wild, untamed places of the world. The divine race seeks to control you, to cage you, to make you into something you are not. Join me, and together we will bring the divine race to its knees. Gorgon stepped from the shadows, his massive form towering over Tiamat, his eyes glowing with a fierce, primal light. The monsters do not bow to anyone, Tiamat, he rumbled, his voice like the grinding of stone against stone. We are creatures of chaos, and we will not be tamed. The divine race has always feared us, but we have survived without the help of any god or demon. We will not fight your war. Tiamat's gaze darkened, her eyes burning with a cold, unyielding rage. You too would defy me, Gorgon, she hissed, her voice filled with venom. You think you can stand against the divine race alone? You think your chaos can protect you from the wrath of Marduk? I offer you power, freedom, dominion over the wild places of the world. But if you refuse, I will crush you beneath my heel and take what is mine by force. Gorgon growled, his massive fists clenching as he met Tiamat's gaze with a fierce, unyielding defiance. We are monsters, he snarled, his voice filled with a deep, primal fury. We do not fear death, and we do not fear you, Tiamat. If you wish to take our realm, you will have to fight for it. The wrath of Tiamat. Tiamat's fury was like a storm unleashed, a tempest of rage that shook the very foundations of the world. The dragons and the monsters had dared to defy her, to challenge her will, and for that, they would pay a terrible price. She had hoped to bring them to her side through diplomacy, through promises of power and glory, but they had spurned her, and now they would learn the true meaning of wrath. In the high peaks where the dragons dwelled, Tiamat unleashed her full power, her serpentine form coiling through the sky like a living storm. The air crackled with energy, the very clouds darkening as her fury spread across the heavens. She struck at Dracula with a force that shook the mountains to their roots, her jaws snapping, her claws rending the very rock as she sought to bring the ancient Wyrm to his knees. Dracula fought back with all the strength of his ancient lineage, his breath a searing inferno that could melt stone, his claws like razors that cut through the very air. But even he could feel the weight of Tiamat's fury pressing down on him, the relentless assault that threatened to break even his formidable power. "You cannot win, Dracula," Tiamat hissed, her voice a thunderous roar that echoed through the mountains. "I will not be denied. You will kneel before me, or you will die." Dracula's roar was one of defiance, but even he could sense the tide turning against him. Tiamat's power was too great, her fury too overwhelming. The very earth trembled beneath her onslaught, and the skies darkened as if in mourning for what was to come. Finally, with a roar of despair, Dracula fell, his massive form crashing to the ground with a force that sent shockwaves rippling through the mountains. Tiamat coiled around him, her eyes blazing with victory as she brought her full weight to bear on the ancient dragon. "You are mine now, Dracula," she hissed, her voice filled with a dark, triumphant glee. "You and your kin will serve me, or you will be destroyed." Broken and beaten, Dracula could only nod, his strength sapped by the fury of Tiamat's assault. "We will serve," he growled, his voice filled with a bitter resignation. "But know this, Tiamat, we do not do so willingly. The dragons are not your slaves." Tiamat's smile was cold and cruel. "That is enough," she purred, her voice like the slither of a blade through silk. "You will fight for me, and together we will bring the divine race to its knees." In the dark, twisted forests where the monsters lurked, Tiamat's fury manifested as a storm of unbridled chaos. The very ground writhed beneath her presence, and the air was thick with the scent of sulfur and decay. Shadows twisted and contorted, forming monstrous shapes that echoed the dark rage within her heart. Gorgon, the mighty leader of the monsters, stood his ground, his massive form towering over the writhing landscape. But even he could sense the dread that Tiamat's wrath brought upon his realm. Tiamat did not waste words this time. Her attack was swift and merciless. She struck out at Gorgon and his kin with a fury that seemed to shake the very essence of chaos itself. Her form shifted and twisted, becoming an incarnation of all the nightmares that the monsters had ever spawned. She was everywhere at once, coiling through the shadows, striking from the darkness, a force of nature that could not be contained. Gorgon, the embodiment of strength and chaos, fought back with all the ferocity of his race. His fists slammed into the earth, causing tremors that rippled through the twisted forest, his roar cacophony that shook the trees to their roots. But Tiamat was relentless, her power far beyond anything he had ever faced. Every blow he landed seemed to pass through her like a ghost, and every attack she launched tore through his defenses like they were nothing. "Do you still defy me, Gorgon?" Tiamat's voice boomed, resonating through the air like a death knell. "You thought you could resist, that your chaos could stand against mine? You are a fool. You will bow to me, or I will tear this realm apart until there is nothing left." Gorgon bellowed in defiance, but his strength was waning. He lashed out with a massive hand, claws extended, but Tiamat's form twisted and reformed, evading his attack with ease. She struck back with a force that drove him to his knees, her power crashing down on him like the weight of a collapsing world. "You will not take my realm." Gorgon roared, his voice filled with a final surge of desperate fury. But even as he spoke, he knew the truth. Tiamat's power was overwhelming, her wrath unstoppable. With a final, crushing blow, Tiamat drove Gorgon into the ground, her form coiling around him like a serpent constricting its prey. The monsters, seeing their leader brought low, began to falter, their chaotic nature turning to fear as they witnessed the might of Tiamat. "Enough!" Gorgon finally gasped, his voice filled with pain and exhaustion. "We will join you, Tiamat, but know that we do so only because you have left us no choice. The monsters do not serve willingly." Tiamat's eyes gleamed with dark triumph as she released her grip, allowing Gorgon to rise, battered and beaten. "You will serve, and that is all that matters," she hissed, her voice dripping with satisfaction. Together, we will bring the divine race to ruin, and your chaos will have its place in the new order that I create. The witches. Finally, Tiamat turned her attention to the witches, a race of beings who dwelled in the shadowy places of the world, where the veil between the living and the dead was thin. The witches were beings of great power and knowledge, masters of the dark arts, who could bend the forces of nature to their will. They were led by Morgana, a sorceress of ancient lineage, whose beauty was matched only by her cunning. Tiamat found Morgana in a secluded valley, where the air was thick with the scent of herbs and the ground was carpeted with a lush, green moss. The valley was a place of tranquility, where the spirits of the dead walked freely among the living, and the very air seemed to hum with the energy of ancient magic. Morgana, Tiamat began, her voice smooth and filled with dark promise. You and your kin are beings of great power, masters of the arcane arts. But the divine race views you with suspicion, with fear. They see you as a threat, a danger to their rule. I offer you a chance to strike back, to reclaim the power that is rightfully yours. Join me, and together we will bring the divine race to its knees. Morgana's eyes were like twin pools of shadow, deep and unreadable. She regarded Tiamat with a calm, measured gaze, her expression revealing nothing of her thoughts. You speak of power, Tiamat, she said softly, her voice like the whisper of a breeze through the trees. But power is not all that we seek. The witches are beings of knowledge, of wisdom. We walk the paths between the worlds, and we see the threads that bind the cosmos together. What you propose is dangerous, reckless. The consequences of such a war could be catastrophic. Tiamat's smile faltered for the first time, her gaze narrowing as she studied Morgana's calm, unreadable expression. The divine race seeks to control you, she hissed, her voice filled with venom. They fear your power, your knowledge. They would see you brought low, your magic bound and broken. But I offer you a different future, one where you are free to practice your arts without fear, without restraint. Morgana's gaze remained calm, her expression revealing nothing of her thoughts. We have no desire to be drawn into a war that could destroy the very fabric of the cosmos, she said softly, her voice like the rustle of leaves in the wind. The witches walk their own path, and we do not take sides in the conflicts of others. Tiamat's eyes flashed with anger, her serpentine form coiling with barely restrained fury. You would refuse me, she hissed, her voice filled with a cold, dangerous edge. You would turn your back on the chance to strike back at those who seek to destroy you? Morgana's gaze remained calm, her expression serene. We do not seek to provoke the gods, she said softly, her voice filled with a quiet resolve. We will not join your war, Tiamat. But neither will we oppose you. We will remain neutral, as we always have, and we will watch and wait to see how the threads of fate unravel. Tiamat's gaze burned with a fierce, unyielding rage, but she knew that pressing the witches further would only drive them away. She nodded slowly, her expression hardening as she turned away. Very well, she said coldly. But know this, Morgana, when the time comes, and the divine race falls, you will be judged for your inaction. Morgana's gaze remained calm, her expression revealing nothing of her thoughts. We will face whatever comes, as we always have, she said softly, her voice filled with a quiet, unshakable confidence. The witches walk their own path, Tiamat, and that path does not lead to war. Tiamat turned and left the valley, her mind already turning to the battles to come. She had secured the allegiance of the giants, the dragons, and the monsters, but the witches had refused her, choosing instead to remain neutral. It was a setback, but not one that would derail her plans. The war against the divine race was coming, and Tiamat would stop at nothing to see her enemies brought low. The aftermath of wrath. With the giants, dragons, and monsters now under her control, Tiamat returned to the underworld, her anger still simmering but tempered by the knowledge that her power had grown. The giants, already pledged to her cause, awaited her command, their eyes gleaming with the anticipation of revenge against the divine race. But it was the broken wool of the dragons and monsters that now bolstered her forces, adding a new, terrifying edge to her already formidable army. In the vast, shadowed halls of her underworld fortress, Tiamat convened a council with Ishtar and Enlil. The chamber was a place of darkness and flame, where the very air seemed to hum with the power of the dark gods. The walls were lined with the bones of ancient beings, and the floor was a shifting mosaic of shadows, ever-changing, ever alive. The dragons and monsters have been subdued, Tiamat began, her voice cold and controlled, though the echo of her fury still lingered in the air. They will fight for us, though they do so under duress. Their power will be invaluable in the battles to come. Ishtar, her form radiant even in the gloom, nodded in approval. With their strength added to our own, we have the force necessary to challenge Marduk and his divine host, she said, her voice filled with a steely resolve. But we must be cautious. The dragons and monsters may fight for us now, but their loyalty is born of fear, not allegiance. We must keep them on a short leash. Enlil, his gaze dark and stormy, nodded in agreement. We will need to strike quickly and decisively, he rumbled, his voice deep and resonant. If we give the divine race time to gather their forces, even our combined power may not be enough. Marduk is a cunning adversary, and he will not be caught off guard easily. Tiamat's eyes gleamed with a dark light as she considered their words. We will strike at the heart of the divine realm, she hissed, her voice filled with malice. We will use the full might of our army to crush Marduk and his allies, and when the divine race lies broken at our feet, we will remake the cosmos in our image. Ishtar's gaze was sharp, her expression hardening as she thought of the battles to come. We will need to be ruthless, she said, her voice filled with cold determination. The divine race will not surrender easily. They will fight to the last, and we must be prepared to show them no mercy. Enlil's stormy gaze flickered with anticipation. We will show them the true meaning of power, he growled, his voice like the rumble of distant thunder. The divine race will fall, and the cosmos will belong to us. Tiamat nodded, her expression filled with dark satisfaction. Then it is decided, she said, her voice a whisper of doom. We will gather our forces, we will march on the divine realm, and we will bring Marduk to his knees. The age of the divine race is over. The age of Tiamat, Ishtar, and Enlil has begun. The shadows deepen. As Tiamat, Ishtar, and Enlil prepared for their final assault on the divine realm, the shadows of the underworld deepened, the flames burned brighter, and the darkness that had once been Nurgle's domain now stretched further, reaching out into the void with a hunger that could not be sated. The giants, the dragons, and the monsters had all been brought under Tiamat's control, their power now bent to her will. The witches remained neutral, but Tiamat knew that even their caution would not save them if they chose to interfere. The storm was gathering, a tempest of unimaginable fury that would soon break upon the cosmos with a force that had not been seen since the dawn of creation. Tiamat's wrath, now harnessed and directed, would be the spearhead of that storm, driving deep into the heart of the divine realm and tearing it apart from within. In the silence of the underworld, the shadows whispered of what was to come, their voices filled with a dark anticipation. The cosmos would tremble before the might of Tiamat's empire, and the divine race, once so powerful, would fall. Marduk, in his celestial palace, could sense the storm approaching, the dark clouds gathering on the horizon. He knew that the time for decisive action had come, that the fate of the universe now hung in the balance. But even as he prepared for the coming battle, he could not shake the feeling that this war would change the very nature of the cosmos forever.